If you have ever been punished for telling the truth in a meeting room, then you already understand how an $80 million deal almost collapsed over a single mistranslated word. And the only person who noticed was the woman refilling the water glasses. Seattle, November. The kind of cold that gets inside your coat before you've even stepped off the bus. Mia Carter stands at the hostess counter of North Star, a fine dining restaurant on the waterfront. Her hands smell like lemon sanitizer. Her shoes are dry, but her socks are not. She has been on shift for 4 hours and has not sat down once. The TV above the bar cuts to a business segment. Cross Harbor Logistics AI announces its largest expansion to date. Ethan Cross appears on screen. The name lands like a hand pressed flat against her chest. She does not move. She holds a folded napkin and stares at the face, older than she remembers. The jaw is the same. So is the way he holds himself, like a man who has already calculated every exit in the room. Her phone buzzes. A new reservation has been entered into the system. Polaris Room, Cross Harbor, 8 p.m., party of 6. She reads it twice. Then her phone buzzes again. A message from an address she does not recognize. A string of letters and numbers that means nothing and everything at once. Mia Carter will be serving Polaris tonight. Don't disappoint us again. The napkin in her hands goes still. Someone knows her name. Someone knows exactly where she is standing. Her fingers move on their own up to her collarbone, to the small silver pendant she wears every shift. Inside it, folded impossibly small, is a pencil sketch of a bridge. Her father drew it 3 weeks before he died. He was a civil engineer. He believed that a structure's integrity depended entirely on the strength of its smallest joint. Mom, she thinks. Not quite a prayer. They're pulling me back in again. Down the hall, Samantha appears with her tablet and her permanent expression of controlled urgency. Mia, I'm putting you on Polaris tonight. You're quiet. They asked for quiet. That's you. Samantha is already gone. Mia looks back at the TV. Ethan Cross is shaking someone's hand, smiling at a camera. The screen cuts to weather. She exhales slowly and folds the napkin into a clean rectangle. Not again, she whispers, but she picks up her tray and she walks toward the Polaris Room. Something about tonight feels different, not smaller, bigger. The kind of bigger that changes things, if you let it. Stay with her. Because what happens in the next 30 minutes is the kind of thing most people spend their whole lives hoping someone will finally do. The Polaris Room seats 12, but tonight it holds 6. Mia takes a breath before she pushes through the service door. Fine dining has its own grammar, the way you enter a room without entering it, the way you refill a glass without interrupting a sentence. She learned that grammar a long time ago, sitting across from lawyers and compliance officers in rooms that smelled like carpet cleaner and ambition. She had been good at it then, too, being invisible, watching everything. She steps inside. 2 men from a European freight consortium sit on one side of the table, blazers open, relaxed. Men who believe the deal is already done. On the other side, a woman named Renata, the consortium's senior counsel, sits with her hands folded and says very little. Ethan Cross sits at the head. He is not what she expected. She had been bracing for the cold version, the face she saw in the termination notice 2 years ago, the man who signed her name off a company roster with a single stroke of a pen. But he looks tired. Not weak tired. The other kind. The kind that comes from carrying something heavy for a long time without putting it down. Beside him sits his interpreter and external consultant, Dylan Price. He is 34 and polished in the specific way of men who know exactly what impression they are making. His suit fits perfectly. His French is fluent. He smiles at the consortium's representative with the warmth of someone who has practiced it in a mirror. Mia sets down the bread basket. She focuses on the work. The water, the bread, the rhythm of the room. The sommelier approaches to discuss the wine list. Ethan leans forward and says something quietly in French. Quelque chose de sec, pas trop présent. Something dry, not too present. Mia's hands go very still over the water pitcher. He knows French, not tourist French. The phrasing is easy, personal. The kind of French you develop when you have actually lived inside the language. Senior executives who spoke fluently still used external interpreters. It created diplomatic distance, bought extra seconds to think, and let them blame any misunderstanding on translation error if the deal went south. Ethan Cross was playing the long game. She files the information away. Not yet. The table settles. Dylan begins his work. The consortium's lead representative, a man named Brandt, speaks in French. Dylan translates into English for Ethan's team. Then Ethan responds and Dylan carries it back. Mia moves through the room quietly, refilling, adjusting, maintaining the kind of presence that registers as furniture. And she listens. She spent 2 years in contract analysis, reading documents the way other people read novels, not for the story, but for the joints, the places where meaning bends, the places where a single word choice decides whether a liability is absolute or negotiable. Dylan is good. She will give him that. Most people would hear a translation and accept it the way they accept the weather forecast, as information, not interpretation. But Mia hears the French, and then she hears Dylan's English version, and the distance between the two is, at first, small enough to seem like style. Brandt uses the French word exclure, to exclude. Dylan renders it as limit. Brandt says the liability structure is definitive, final, fixed, settled. Dylan says generally defined. Each substitution is defensible on its own. A translator with a light touch, someone might say, smoothing the edges. But in a deal of this size, exclude and limit are not synonyms. They are different architectures. They hold different weight. She retreats to the service corridor. Harold Bennett is there, wiping the inside of a wine glass with the patience of a man who has no reason to rush. He is 67 years old and has worked at North Star for 9 years. He speaks rarely. When he does, people tend to remember it. He sees her face. "You okay?" "Something's wrong," she says. The translator, he's softening everything, on purpose. Harold looks at the glass in his hand. "You know what the hardest part of my old job was?" he says. She shakes her head. Knowing something was wrong and not being the one withstanding to say it. He sets the glass down. "You always had standing, Mia. You just forgot." She wants to argue. She has spent 2 years being very careful about exactly this kind of certainty. The certainty that led her to push back in a compliance meeting 3 years ago and started a chain of events that ended with her mother dying in a hospital bed while medical bills stacked up on the kitchen counter. She knows what it costs to be right when nobody is ready to hear it. She goes back into the Polaris room. Ethan Cross is about to say something in French that changes everything. And Dylan Price is about to realize he's been caught. Stay right here. Dylan is in the middle of a translation when Mia returns. Brandt has just said something that, in her ear, translates clearly as, "The absolute terms are non-negotiable." Dylan tells Ethan's team, They're open to revisiting the structure if both parties agree. Mia sets down a glass of water. She picks up the wine menu from the sideboard. She selects the most expensive bottle in the cellar, not because she intends to serve it, but because it gives her a reason to be at the table for 60 more seconds. She positions herself just behind Ethan's right shoulder and leans in the way servers do. Quiet, neutral, professional. "The Merlot pairs well with the duck, sir." And then, just barely above the ambient sound of the room, she says the rest of it. "He's not translating you. He just turned your no into a maybe." She steps back. Ethan Cross does not turn around. He does not change his expression. He simply reaches forward and picks up his water glass, and his eyes drop to the table in the specific way of a man who is recalculating. Then he looks at Dylan. He says, in French, very simply, "Répétez exactement ce que j'ai dit." Say it exactly as I said it. Dylan goes still for half a second. The smile does not leave his face, but something behind it does. At the service entrance, Mia presses her back against the wall and waits for her hands to stop shaking. Dylan recovers. Of course he does. That's what makes him dangerous. He retranslates the previous exchange with clean, precise language, as though the first version was a draft, and this is simply the revision. Ethan listens. His face gives nothing away. Mia retreats to the corridor and opens her small notepad. She has been writing, without fully deciding to, since the meal began. 8:41 p.m. Brant. Exclure toute responsabilité partielle. Dylan. Limit certain partial responsibilities. 8:47 p.m. Brant. Terme définitif. Dylan. Terms as currently defined. 8:53 p.m. Brant. Aucune révision possible. Dylan. Limited room for revision. She looks at the list. It is not a coincidence. A coincidence does not have a direction. This has a direction. Every single substitution moves the liability structure the same way, away from Ethan's team toward the consortium. Incrementally. The kind of drift that is impossible to challenge in the moment because each word choice is defensible, but that becomes, across the length of a negotiation, an entirely different deal than the one either side believes they are making. Her phone buzzes. The same unrecognized address. Stay in your lane. This doesn't involve you anymore. Anymore. That word is not random. Whoever sent this knows who she used to be. They want her to feel watched. She tucks the phone away. She thinks about the template phrase she noticed in the fabricated compliance document that ended her career. A specific construction she had flagged at the time and then let go because, by that point, no one was listening. She thinks about Omnex, the name she has been trying not to think about for 2 years. Dylan speaks to Samantha from across the room, in the register of a man who wants to be overheard by exactly one person. Keep the waitress in her lane. Samantha catches Mia's eye with the expression that says, "Don't make this complicated." Mia says nothing. She finishes placing the plates. She turns toward the service door. At the door, she pauses. She simply closes her hand around the notepad in her apron and holds it there. This is the same method they used before. Not threats, management. The smooth, professional application of weight until a person learned that making noise cost more than staying quiet. She had learned that lesson very well. She was tired of knowing it. Her phone is still in her apron. She does not open it. She knows what her mother's voice sounds like without pressing play. Baby, I don't need you to win. I need you to live straight. If you tell the truth, even if the whole world doesn't believe you, I will. I always will. She folds the notepad and places it in the inner pocket of her apron, next to her heart. She goes back in. She has the evidence in her pocket now. But evidence alone has never been enough. And Mia Carter knows that better than anyone. What Ethan Cross does in the next 5 minutes is going to tell you everything about who he really is. At 9:14 p.m., Ethan Cross sets down his fork. He does it quietly. The fork touches the plate, and that is the end of something. I'd like to pause before we discuss the final clause, he says. Dylan translates. Brant nods, comfortable, still convinced the room belongs to him. Ethan looks at Noah Reyes, his in-house counsel, who has been sitting at the far end of the table saying almost nothing, which is exactly what in-house counsel do when they have already done everything that needs doing. Noah opens the leather portfolio in front of him and removes a document printed in 2 columns. This is a dual-track transcript, Ethan says. His voice is even and unhurried. My legal team records every significant negotiation in parallel, the source language and the translated version. Standard procedure for deals above 50 million. He slides the document to the center of the table. I'd like us to review the last 40 minutes together. The room changes. It does not change loudly. No confrontation, no raised voice. But something in the pressure of the air shifts. The way a room shifts when someone opens a window that nobody knew was there. Dylan's smile holds. His eyes do not. Brant leans forward and looks at the document. His senior counsel, Renata, does too. She reads quickly, and Mia, standing at the sideboard, watches the moment Renata understands what she is looking at. The woman's face does not move, but her right hand lifts slightly and then resettles. That is the tell. Renata is not part of this. Renata is surprised. Column A is what was said, Ethan continues. Column B is what was translated. If you'd like to read them side by side. Dylan says, there may be stylistic choices that read differently in isolation. You didn't miss a word, Ethan says. You changed the direction. Silence. Dylan opens his mouth. He constructs a sentence. It is a very good sentence. Qualified, deflective, professionally reasonable. He knows how to make a room feel uncertain about what it just heard. But Brant is already reading column B, and Renata is already reading column A, and the distance between them, in print, on a page, is not something that reasonable language can paper over. Brant says something in French that Mia does not need to translate. The tone translates itself. Ethan thanks the consortium for their patience and suggests a short recess. Dylan is escorted out by Noah and a second member of Ethan's team. No scene, no raised voice. Dylan walks out the way he walked in, polished, upright, and the door closes behind him. The room is very quiet. Ethan Cross turns in his chair and looks directly at Mia. She goes still, the way you go still when you realize the moment you've been rehearsing in your head has actually arrived. He says, you've been watching this since the first course. It is not a question. Yes, she says. You work in compliance. I used to. He looks at her for 3 full seconds. Something moves behind his eyes that is not calculation. It is older than that. I should have looked twice, he says. 2 years ago. The sentence is not framed as an apology. It is harder and more honest than an apology. An admission of a governance failure by a man who does not make excuses for his governance failures. The pendant at her collarbone feels very heavy. She does not cry. She has learned to locate the grief quickly and set it to the side, the way you set a glass down carefully so it doesn't tip. My mother died thinking I was dishonest, she says. The words come out level. She is proud of that. Ethan does not look away. I know, he says. I chose what protected the company, not what protected the truth. A pause. For a year, I've been trying to reopen the audit, but without a clean trail of evidence, it's only a story. He reaches into his portfolio and slides a single page across the table toward her. A financial diagram. Cash flow anomalies, marked in red. At the bottom, a company name. Omnex. This isn't the first time, he says. They've collapsed 3 of my deals in the past 18 months. Always the same architecture. Interpreter interference, documentation drift, liability clause inversion. He looks at her. Always someone who understood contracts well enough to fake one. She looks at the diagram. She looks at the pattern. Something cold and clarifying moves through her, strips things back to their actual shape. She reaches into her apron and places her notepad on the table. I've been keeping a record, she says, since the first course. Ethan looks at it. He does not touch it yet. 8:41 p.m., she says. He translated exclude as limit. 8:47. Definitive terms became terms as currently defined. 8:53. Stop, he says. She stops. He is looking at the notepad with an expression she cannot fully read. Not surprise, something older than surprise. Come sit down, he says. She sat down at that table. For the first time in 2 years, someone asked her to sit instead of stand. But what she finds in the next document is going to connect something she has been carrying alone all this time. Don't go anywhere. They work for 40 minutes. Noah pulls documentation. Mia reads it the way she used to read everything. Fast, thorough. The part of her brain that catalogs language the way other people catalog faces. Ethan watches her read. He does not hurry her. The room has been cleared. The consortium has retired to the hotel bar. Dylan's access credentials have been revoked. Noah handled it with the quiet efficiency of someone who has been waiting for permission to do exactly this. Mia stops on page 7. There is a clause, a specific construction, a subordinate phrase used to distribute liability in an MA compliance framework. The kind of phrase that appears maybe a dozen times in the entire body of American contract law at any given moment, because it is, functionally, an unusual architecture. She has seen it before, not in a textbook, not in a case study, in the document that ended her career. She places her finger on the line. This phrase, she says, I know it, not because I've studied it, because I've seen it used in exactly this structural position, in the document they said I forged. Noah is already on his phone pulling archived files. It appears in an Omnex subsidiary filing, he says after 40 seconds. 2019, again in 2021. The same subsidiary was dissolved in 2023, but we have reason to believe the principals reorganized under a new holding structure. Who's the principal? Ethan asks. Graham Voss, Noah says. Vice president at Omnex. He's been quiet for 8 months. Until now. Ethan sits back. The room is very still. Outside, Seattle continues. A boat moves on the water. The city does not know that in a private dining room on the 3rd floor, something that has been broken for 2 years is being carefully identified. Mia looks at her hands. They are not shaking. She notices that. She thinks her father would have noticed it too. The strongest structures, he used to say, are not the ones that never bend. They're the ones that know how to carry weight without losing their shape. She has been carrying this weight for 2 years, bent almost to the point of breaking. But here she is, shape intact, hands steady, sitting at a table with the evidence in front of her. He sent the email, she says. The one that came to my phone tonight. Dylan had access to the reservation system through the VIP booking channel. If Voss is running Dylan, then Voss knew I was here tonight. She pauses. They brought me into this room because they thought I'd stay invisible. They thought I'd learned my lesson. Ethan is quiet for a moment. They miscalculated, he says. It is not a compliment. It is a statement of fact delivered without flourish. Noah sets up a secure conference line and announces precisely that the call is being recorded with the knowledge of all parties and is intended as formal notice. Graham Voss appears on screen, hotel room, jacket on, expression measured. The look of a man who has been in difficult calls before and won most of them. Mr. Cross, he says. I understand there's been some confusion this evening. No confusion, Ethan says. We're tracing money. You're chasing ghosts. We're filing a formal fraud complaint and requesting a forensic audit of every deal Omnex has touched that intersects with a cross-harbor counterpart in the last 3 years. A pause. Voss says, that's an aggressive posture based on a documented pattern, Noah says. A verified linguistic fingerprint appearing in 3 separate instruments, and testimony from a former contract specialist who has direct experiential knowledge of your methodology. The word testimony lands in the room like something solid. Mia feels it. She has been sitting just outside the camera frame, notepad open, Harold's old pen in her hand. He pressed it into her palm at the start of her shift, the way you hand someone an umbrella when you can already see the sky. Ethan looks at her. There's something else, he says, about the phrase. Mia leans forward into the frame. Graham Voss looks back with the professional blankness of a man who has trained himself not to react. She says, that phrase isn't just wording, it's a signature. Whoever wrote it has written it before, in the same structural position, with the same distributional intent. It appears in 3 Omnex instruments between 2019 and 2021. It appeared in the document used to terminate my employment in 2023. And it appeared tonight in a clause that Dylan Price was moving toward introducing in the final agreement. She does not rush. She does not raise her voice. That's not a coincidence. That's a fingerprint. Graham Voss says nothing. Noah cuts the call. The call is over. The complaint is filed. But now comes the part nobody tells you about. The part after you finally tell the truth out loud. Because Ethan Cross is about to ask Mia Carter a question she has been afraid of her entire life. The conference line closes. Noah gathers the documentation and excuses himself to make calls. The room is empty except for the 2 of them, Ethan Cross and Mia Carter, sitting across from each other at a table where, 2 hours ago, she was refilling water glasses and trying to be invisible. He looks at her for a long moment. If we do this correctly, he says, your employment record gets reviewed as part of the fraud investigation. The termination document, the forged one, becomes evidence, which means your name gets cleared. He pauses. But it will be public. The case, the connection, your role in tonight. You won't be able to stay invisible." He waits. "Are you willing to be seen?" She thinks about her mother's voice. "Baby, I need you to live straight." She thinks about Harold's pen in her hand and what it means to be given back the thing that was taken from you. She thinks about 2 years of early morning buses and late-night tip counts and a medical debt that does not care about her feelings. About her mother's face in the hospital, which was not afraid, only tired. She says, "I'm scared." Ethan nods once. He does not offer comfort. He just receives the honesty of it. "But I'm more tired of swallowing the truth," she finishes. He looks at her with something she cannot name, more like recognition than admiration. The way one person recognizes another who has been carrying the same kind of weight from a different direction. "Then we do it right," he says. 3 weeks later, Dylan Price's contract is formally terminated, and his case is referred to a commercial fraud investigation unit. Graham Voss and Omnex are notified of a civil action and a concurrent request for regulatory audit. The consortium, once presented with the corrected record, agrees to re-engagement under independent oversight. The deal does not die, it is rebuilt. Mia's employment termination is flagged for review as material evidence in the fraud complaint. The process is not fast. It is not clean. It is not the exoneration she used to imagine on the 6 a.m. bus when the grief sat heavy on her chest. But it is real, and it is moving. 6 weeks after the night in the Polaris room, she walks into North Star for the last time as a server. She finds Harold in the kitchen corridor, stacking linens. She holds out his pen. He closes her hand around it. "Use it to sign things you actually believe in," he says. She holds it against her palm for a moment. The weight of it is nothing. The weight of what it means is something she does not have a word for yet. She takes off her apron, folds it neatly, and leaves it on the counter. She walked out of that kitchen with a pen and an offer. But it's what happens next, in a small conference room at Cross Harbor, that you've been waiting for this whole story. The Cross Harbor conference room on the 14th floor is smaller than she expected. It has a view of the water, not a dramatic view, the kind that tells you the city is still out there, still going, still indifferent and alive. Mia sits at the table with a probationary consulting contract in front of her. 6 months. Legal and compliance review. Ethics advisory on the current fraud investigation. A path back into the professional world. Not a door thrown open, but a door unlocked, which is all she asked for. She sets her pendant on the table, the little bridge, the little sketch her father made on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when he was still alive, and she still believed that doing your job well was sufficient protection. Ethan comes in. He looks at the pendant and then at her. "Your father was a structural engineer," he says. Not a question. He has read the file. "He believed in load-bearing integrity," she says. "He thought every structure told you the truth about what it was built for, if you knew how to look." Ethan sits across from her. "You saved more than the deal," he says, his voice quieter than it is in the boardroom, stripped of its professional weather. "You saved the part of me that had stopped questioning my own decisions." She looks at the contract. "I don't know how to be normal again," she says, "in this world. Trusting it." He does not tell her it will be easy. He does not tell her to be brave. He seems to understand that she has already been brave enough for 1 year, possibly 2, and that what she needs now is not a speech. "Then let's start with something small," he says. "Dinner. No contracts, no suits." A pause. Food that stays warm. She looks up at him, not a man who moves slowly, who asks instead of assumes, who sits with silence the way Harold does, not filling it, just keeping it company. She feels something loosen behind her sternum, the particular release of something that has been held tight for a very long time. Slow sounds safe, she says. The corner of his mouth moves. Good, he says. We'll do slow. She picks up the pen and signs the contract on the line where her name belongs. The bridge pendant catches the light from the window. Outside, Seattle does what Seattle does. The water moves, the city holds. And Mia Carter, who spent 2 years making herself invisible, sits in a room on the 14th floor and lets herself be seen. Some things take time to break, and some things, once you decide to rebuild them, turn out to be stronger than they ever were before. 2 years, a fabricated document, a mother who never stopped believing her daughter, and one night in a private dining room where the only person paying attention was the woman everyone forgot to look at. Mia didn't save that deal by being loud. She did it by being present, by refusing just one more time to be the person who knew the truth and stayed quiet. If this story moved something in you tonight, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to know what Mia signs 6 months from now, that story is already waiting. Because some bridges, once you decide to rebuild them, turn out to be stronger than they ever were before.